Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But if you're ready to level up your life and get results that truly matter in your health, business, mindset, and relationships, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to Scheer Madness, where we have unscripted, real conversations with the world's top athletes, entrepreneurs, and coaches. Discover real-world and tactical advice from the best in the business. Let's go. Hey everyone, my name is Rachel Scheer, and I am the host of the Scheer Madness podcast, where we have unscripted, real conversations with the world's best athletes, entrepreneurs, and coaches. I'm so honored to have on today's guest. He has an incredibly inspiring story of overcoming being horrifically wounded as a Navy SEAL, and he now helps millions of people through coaching and speaking.
Jason Redman, he is a retired Navy SEAL who was wounded while deployed in Iraq.
So in September of 2007, I was literally at the height of my career. Everybody in life at some point is going to walk into an ambush. Some sort of catastrophic event that's going to rock your world and have this impact on your life. The majority of people who walk this earth have never wrestled with an enemy combatant in the deep blackness of night. I quickly realized I was helpless. I was totally pinned down in front of my guys, and there was nothing I could do. I would have given anything to be out of this situation. That day became a benchmark for me. It changed everything in my life. I realized in that moment that I got a second chance at life. Most people, you only get one shot to go through this life and make the most of it. And most people take it for granted. In an ambush, we talk about the point of attack. It's called the X. The reason I survived the one that I was in is because we got off the X. And I said, okay, let's drive forward. We can do this. But everybody out there will go through life ambushes. And these are these hard moments that come along and just knock us off our feet. Because we've all been in that situation where we're like, oh my God, I can't make payroll. How am I going to bring in some revenue right now? We can't make rent. I've felt it. I realized the mark of a man is not found in his past, but how he overcomes adversity and builds his future. But the great thing about major life ambushes, they also can define you and make you better, just like that ambush that I went through. If you can create balance in these 5 key areas of something I call the Pentagon of peak performance, I guarantee you will be ready for any ambush that comes along. When I was wounded, I had gone through that journey where I had colossally failed as a leader, where I had guys say, kick him out and take his trident. It is the hardest road I've ever walked in my entire lifetime. But it built tremendous mental leadership. The only thing stopping you from accomplishing greatness in your life is you. When you are struggling, get off the X and overcome.
He has appeared on Fox News, CBS, CNN, and multiple documentaries, including History Channel, Navy SEALs, and America's Secret Warriors. He is a New York Times bestselling author and soon to be releasing a new book called Overcome, which we'll be talking about today. So without further ado, Jason Redman, thank you so much for being on here today.
Rachel, thank you for having me on.
So this is actually my first time meeting you. I was introduced by a mutual friend, but he says incredible things about you, and I'm just excited to hear about your story.
Well, thanks. Yeah, our mutual friend is a great guy, and they must be true because I can't afford to pay him to say things like that about me. So
Yeah. So let's just dive into it. Tell me a little bit about your story. I know you were a Navy SEAL lieutenant for a while, and you had a traumatic experience. leading to what we like to talk about as the life ambush. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was just an amazing journey. I mean, I came in as a young kid. Literally, I joined the Navy when I was 17 years old, still in high school. Reported to boot camp at 18, went through SEAL training at 19, and found myself operating in Central and South America doing counter drug work pre 9/11. Got selected for a commission, came back post 9/11, and made some mistakes as a young leader. Mistakes almost to the point where, from my own arrogance and ego, I got myself almost kicked out. But
Kicked out of the Navy SEALs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. There were definitely several people that, because I was bullheaded and I was stubborn, and later when I talk about life ambushes, I was a little bit in denial over what was happening, and really a poor understanding of what it is to be an effective leader, especially of a combat unit. But the reality is, years later, I would learn they are the same basic principles that make great leaders in any organization, because the core leadership's the same regardless of what you do. So went down that road, finally grew up a little, course corrected. Found myself leading an amazing troop of guys in Iraq in 2007. Very successful deployment. One of the very last missions on that deployment, I found myself on the receiving end of an enemy machine gun and Al-Qaeda ambush. I was hit 8 times between my body and body armor, 2 rounds in the left elbow that effectively destroyed my elbow, multiple rounds, helmet, left night vision tube shot off, and I took a round in the face that effectively damaged the right side of my face. It took off my nose, broke my right cheekbone, blew out a part of my right cheekbone, vaporized my orbital floor, broke all the bones above the eye, shattered my jaw, and started a whole new journey, obviously finding myself medevaced home and starting this journey of being put back together. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't think anybody ever thinks about being catastrophically injured. I used to think, maybe I'll get shot and it'll, it's merely a flesh wound, let me just, let me run this off, give me some Motrin. Yeah. And I remember laying in that hospital bed and I couldn't talk. I was trached, I was wired shut. They were feeding me from a stomach tube. Originally, they were telling me they were going to amputate my arm. And I remember writing to the doctor, hey, doc, how long is this going to take? Because, I got things to do. Like my older sister was getting married. And I was like, I got to get to her wedding. And then I got to get back to Iraq to my guys. So how long is it going to take you to put me back together? And she was like incredulous. She looked at me like, I don't know, like I asked her hey, could you go to the bank and withdraw like $1 billion and bring it back to my room, please? And she was like, months, like, yeah. Lieutenant, you understand it's going to be years to put you back together. You are looking at dozens and dozens of surgeries. And I think that was kind of the first time that I was like, holy smokes. I mean, this is it. This is my reality. And it actually did become that reality.
I have a question. In that moment of being shot, did you think that was the end and like you were going to die in that moment, or what was the whole thought process revolving around that moment? We always hear about, when we experience near-death moments of everything kind of flashes before our eyes. What were the thoughts during that moment?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. So yes, it absolutely did kind of transpire like that. And that firefight lasted about 40 minutes. So okay. I was shot in the first about 5 minutes of that firefight, and then I was pinned down out front in front of my guys. So I had a lot of time to think. And my thought process, initially it was a little bit operational. I was thinking about how do we get out of this? What assets do we have? I tried to talk to my team leader in Lowell's of Fire and what we were doing. But what started happening is I was bleeding out. I was losing a lot of blood, and we are trained in trauma medicine. And I knew the signs. I knew I was starting to go into shock. I was getting cold. It was getting harder and harder to move my extremities because obviously when you're losing blood and you're going into hypovolemic shock, your body starts pooling the blood into your core. Yeah. So I was kind of recognizing this, and then it just started to get harder and harder to breathe. Every breath, I felt like I was running a marathon at a sprint. And it was kind of at that point that I started to think to myself, you may not make it out of this. Like, they're still in this fierce firefight. It's probably not going to let up, and you may die right here on this spot. And I'll be honest, at first that made me angry. I was angry because I was the leader and we had gotten into this situation, and, I was like, I should have done something different. Then I got angry thinking that the enemy was going to get the satisfaction of knowing they killed me. And then from there, it started to move to thoughts of my family. Yeah. Like, I was married. I have 3 kids. My kids at that time were 8, my 8-year-old son, and then 2 daughters who were 5 and 3. And I started to think, you're never going to go home. Like, I was only 1 week from going home, and Halloween has always been a big, fun event for us. We decorate the whole house, and I remember thinking to myself, you're never going to trick or treat again. You're not going to make it to Christmas this year. You won't raise your son to be a good, strong man. You won't walk your daughters down the aisle. And that is an incredibly heartbreaking moment. And then I started thinking about decisions I had made in my life, poor decisions. I'll be honest. I kind of look back and I was like, man, I had a lot of regrets. Yeah. And when you're facing your death, I think that is what starts to happen. I'll tell you what did not happen, and I like to tell people this. Not once did I think about any of the stuff I had. Mm-hmm. Not once did I wonder, what my truck was doing back in the garage. Not once did I wonder, did my motorcycle miss me? None of that stuff mattered. In those final, what I thought were my final moments, all I thought about was my family and how I would have given anything to just say I love you one more time. So that's what was going through my mind.
That almost makes me want to tear up. I mean, I think it just really puts things into perspective for you on what's important in life, and all the superficial things that we tend to care about on a day-to-day basis. At the end of the face of death, none of it matters. It's who you love, it's the way you lived your life, and that's what's truly important. And I had to do something recently. I went through a type of a Navy SEALs training. It probably wasn't nearly to the extent of anything you've done, but they actually had us write our own obituaries, and we had to write out from like our loved one's perspective, like what they would say about us and how we wanted to be remembered. And I had to write, and everything that I came up with was who I was and the people's lives I impacted. And we had to write about who we'd want there. And even just doing that small little thing for myself just put everything into perspective as to what is really important in life, because in the face of death, all those other things really don't matter. Like you said, it really doesn't. So I love that you say that.
Thanks.
Another question that I've had regarding that whole incident, is this something that you remember like very vividly, like an event I can think back to in my life where, like even 9/11, for example, I was a young girl at that time, but I can remember the events. I can remember what I was wearing that day. Is this something that is like very vividly ingrained in your mind, or is it something that's more of a blur?
No, it's incredibly vivid. I remember all the details, although over the years, I came to find that there were gaps in my memory. And it was interesting. Over the years, I would meet different people who were there, including the medevac crew I met later, who actually filled in gaps of things that I wasn't aware of. But in the moment, when I got to the hospital, I ended up writing out the firefight because everybody wanted to know what happened. And I couldn't speak, so I had to write it out. And then, like I said, later, I came to find out that there were things that my guys said, hey, do you remember when this happened? And I said, no, I don't remember that. And to this day, those memories still aren't there. I know they happened because they recall them to me. But what I recount, and you'll see when in the Trident, I write about how there are certain things that were written from my perspective initially, what I believed. So the very beginning of the book, The Trident, we start off in the firefight and we tell some things based off what I thought was real. So one of those things was I believe my arm had been shot off in the firefight. What had happened is when I was shot, I fell or laid down, and my arm was pinned under my body in gear. But because of the damage, I couldn't feel anything. So when I reached over, I couldn't feel my arm, and that's what in my mind, I believed. And later found out, obviously, that wasn't true. They were able to save and do some damage repair to my arm. But those are just some of the interesting things. But in my mind, that sequence of events, as a matter of fact, it's pretty funny with the doctors. They, right off the bat, they were like, "Did you lose consciousness?" They kept asking me that. And I was like, "No, I didn't lose consciousness at all. I was awake the whole time." Turns out that wasn't true.
Okay, so you're in and out a little bit. So you're in the hospital, you realize you're going to live, but it's going to be, you're asking how long until I can go back, and you wanted to actually get back into being a Navy SEAL, correct?
That's right.
You get right back into doing what you were doing before. So what was it like realizing that that may not be the route you're going to be going, and going under a lot of different surgeries here in the future, trying to get back to having somewhat of a quality of life? Yeah.
Well, I think for anybody that's going through traumatic events, hope and positivity are such a powerful thing.
Yeah.
And I think, when we sustain some sort of traumatic event, we do need to think about, how do I get back to the best version or where I was before?
Yeah.
Recognizing that sometimes that won't happen. And for me, that kind of started right at the very beginning. I wanted to get back operational, obviously. But that wasn't immediate. I will say that for the first 4 or 5 days, I really struggled with what had happened, to be perfectly honest. I think for many of us, when things happen, we second guess ourselves. Man, what if I had gone right? What if I had gone left? What if I had done this? What if I had done that? Did I make the right decision? So there's a lot of second guessing that goes on, and it was hard to be positive through that, I'll be perfectly honest. But there was an event that happened about 5 days into the hospital. I had some individuals that came into my room, and they had a short conversation with me, and my wife had left for the first time. And then they started having a conversation off to the side of the bed as I was drifting a little. And the conversation was all about, what a shame, what a pity. We send these young men and women off to war. They come back, they're broken. They're probably never going to have a great quality of life. They're probably never going to be able to achieve their full potential again. And then they left. And I remember laying there, like, thinking about this, like, is that me? Like, is that my future? Like, I'm that's not me. I'm going to, I want to be a SEAL again. I'm going to overcome. And I realized that you have a choice. You can accept that. And unfortunately, I think so often in this negative world we live in, people accept things like that. They're told something, and they plant those seeds in their head, and they accept it as reality, and they get stuck.
Like, why me? Why me?
The victim mentality. And in that moment, I had that choice. You can be a victim, or you can be a victor and drive forward. And when my wife came back into the room, I said, never again. I said, never again. I've been struggling, but I refuse to feel sorry for myself any longer. And I wrote out this sign that it said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming in this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds that I received, I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country I deeply love. I'll make a full recovery. What is full? That's the absolute utmost physically I have the ability to recover. And then I'm going to push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you're not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed it, the management, because it seemed like it made sense to have some, authority on it. And we put it on the door and said, hey, nobody's allowed in here until they read this and heed this.
Wow.
And that kind of became my, I'm going to be that guy. This is what I'm going to live by. And that sign went on and took a life of its own. But it kind of became my anchor point. I had made that choice. And I'll be honest, sometimes it was hard. I mean, sometimes I wanted to feel sorry for myself. But I was like, dude, you can't do that. You're the overcome guy. You're the sign on the door guy. Get up and go. Your kids need you. Other people need you. Other wounded warriors need you. And that really is the essence of leadership. Your leadership is to inspire others around you to achieve something. And from that moment forward, I just said, I'm going to drive forward.
Yeah, I think that's true leadership mentality. Speaking of leadership, do you think it is something that you have always just had engraved in you to be a leader, or is it something that you've developed over time with the experiences that you've had?
Definitely developed over time. I was a
Yeah,
bad leader at
you're
one
bad.
point.
Okay.
I did. I was, and leadership is learned. I meet a lot of people that say, "Oh, are leaders born or are leaders made?" And leaders absolutely are made. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people have natural traits that make them a better leader. They're just some things, patience and their ability to deal with things, they're calm under pressure. All those things make good leaders, but it absolutely can be learned. If I can learn to be a good leader, anyone can learn to be a good leader. And it was time, it was experience, it was time under tension, it was falling down and failing and getting back up and driving forward and constantly always saying, I want to be better, which I don't care if you're an entrepreneur or you're in the military or whatever you do. If you follow that path, you will become a better leader also.
Wow. Yeah. So what are some things you think that make a great leader then? I know you may have kind of touched on a little bit of those already.
So I teach something, and it actually is in the new book, Overcome, the three tenets of being an effective leader.
Okay.
And so often I meet people in companies. I mean, I've spoke to Fortune 500, 100 companies, professional sports teams. And so often people who become leaders, what they're focused on is, how do I lead my people better? And they're focused on the end state instead of looking at what the initial process starts with. And one of the things I always like to ask people is, well, how well do you lead yourself?
Yeah.
How do you build structure and discipline into your life? Do you follow the things that you say? Because that is the essence of leadership. That's where it starts. And I realized when I was younger, when I had my problems as a leader, I wasn't doing that. I was saying, hey, look at me, follow the words that are coming out of my mouth. But the reality is, it all starts with you. It starts with how you lead yourself. And it's so much less of what comes out of your mouth and so much more of everything you've done before that moment you even open your mouth. Because people will follow you if you give them a reason to. So rule number one, you have to lead yourself. If you're having leadership problems in your company, if you're having leadership problems in your family, look to yourself first. Square yourself away, and it's already going to start to make rule number two easier, which is you've got to lead others. Your job as a leader is to motivate and inspire, to mentor, to push, to help them be successful. And if they're successful, you're going to be successful. You're going to accomplish the mission. You're going to accomplish what you're going after. And they're going to want to continue to follow you because A, you're doing rule number one, B, you're doing rule number two, which is leading others, leading them. Rule number three, you've got to lead always. You cannot pick and choose when you're going to lead. Once you put on that leadership hat, you are a leader forever.
Yeah.
You can't just turn it off and say, well, I don't really want to be a leader today. I'm tired or I'm angry or something bad happened or whatever. It doesn't work that way. Your people look to you as a leader. And I'll tell you that every moment you have when you decide you don't want to be a leader, you allow some negative thing come out of your mouth or you do something, it damages and impacts your credibility as a leader. And people need to understand credibility is the currency of leadership. So this is where I tell people, once you decide to become a leader, you've got to lead always,
I love that.
24/7. And that's tough. But if you want to be an effective leader and you follow those three traits, I guarantee you will find success. It's not always success doesn't always happen on the timeline. It doesn't always happen in the manner we think it's going to. But I guarantee you, if you follow that, you will find some level of success.
Wow. Yeah, I can't agree any more than that. With what you've gone through and your life ambush, which I want to talk a little bit about what life ambushes are. I know yours is a little bit more of a physical, of course, of a life ambush, but there's different tiers to that, of course. Do you think going through everything that you have has allowed you to step more into being a better leader and living more of what your purpose is?
Absolutely, unequivocally. You don't become successful through your successes.
Yeah.
You become successful through your failures. You become better through your failures. You become better through the scars that we all carry. So I have physical scars, but I also have mental scars. I have emotional scars. I ran my first business, a nonprofit, for almost 10 years. I have business scars from that, and actually went down a dark road where I got involved in a bad project that ended up in a lawsuit. Very hard on me. That was a third life ambush that I was in. But those are all things that I learned from, and they made me better. And I made sure, okay, I'm not going to make those mistakes again. So what are the things that I can put in place to take care of me, my team, and make sure that never happens again? So that's one of the greatest things about trauma and hard crisis events in our life. So many people look at them as like this victim mentality. Oh, woe is me. I've lost something. I've lost my money. I've lost my health. God forbid, I've lost someone we love. But the reality is we can never go back and change the past. All we can do is drive forward and shape the future. But that thing that occurred can make you better. It can make you amazing. I mean, I look at a family who lost a child to cancer, and devastating. And it took them a while to overcome that. What they did is then they created a nonprofit to help other families that had children with cancer. And hopefully, so now the legacy of their child lives on forever. I mean, these are the things that people grow and they get better from, as opposed to some who, unfortunately, these bad things happen. Not only do they not learn from it, but it destroys them.
And it kind of becomes their identity long-term wise as well, too. It kind of goes to the saying, like, sometimes your test can almost become your testimony, and using that to help other people, which I think is amazing, which is what you're doing essentially. In the book Overcome, you talk about these life ambushes in a few different ways. So, and how to overcome life ambushes. So I want to hear a little bit about that. So what are some tools that people can use when they're dealing with a life ambush?
Absolutely. So many people hear my story and they think, oh, he's a Navy SEAL, or, oh my God, this story of him being in this vicious firefight, I can't relate to that. Well, the reality is you can, because although my enemy ambush was with real bullets and explosions, life ambushes happen to everyone. We all have these catastrophic crisis moments that come along and just knock us off our feet and just totally wreck our schedule for months, sometimes even years, depending on what it is, whether it's a relationship failure, whether it's a business failure, whether it's life-threatening illness or injury, maybe sexual trauma or the loss of a loved one. When these moments occur, you may not be getting hit by actual bullets or explosions, but you feel like it in your life.
Yeah, for sure. I can relate to that.
And mentally and emotionally, if I was to hook you up to medical equipment that measured your breathing, heart rate, brain activity, it would look exactly the same as mine did in that firefight.
Yeah.
Those are life ambushes, and they're devastating.
No, you feel like it in the moment, like your life is over, like you don't want to go on, and I can completely relate to that. Yeah.
So what we did is we developed a step-by-step process in this book. How my team survived that night was we followed a series of steps, what we call in the military immediate action drills. So if something bad happens, we have to immediately act. And this is where you start I talk a lot about the overcome mindset. This is part of the overcome mindset. It is this proactive mindset of bad things are going to happen. We don't live in this perfect world. Unfortunately, no matter how much preparing, no matter how much planning we can do, bad things are going to happen. So by having that mindset, when bad things do happen, you immediately start to think, okay, that bad thing has happened. How do I react to it? And that's exactly what we teach, is the REACT methodology. So REACT is an acronym for, first thing you have to do is you have to recognize you're in a crisis, which almost is the hardest step for a lot of people, because we often don't want to acknowledge that a bad thing has happened. We want to push it away. We sometimes want to stick our head in the sand and just pray it'll go away. Hey, if I ignore this long enough, maybe it'll fix itself. And it almost never happens. As a matter of fact, typically the longer we deal with it, or typically the longer we ignore it, the worse it gets.
Yeah.
In the military, and a lot of people hear me talk about this, any ambush or any incident, the point of attack is called the X. And in order to survive, we were taught you have to get off the X immediately. You have to get out of the attack zone. And life ambushes are no different. The quicker you can recognize that you are in an ambush and you can start to get off that X, the quicker you're going to be able to heal and move forward. Most people don't want to do that because most people are not willing to do that because they're so focused on the pain, the misery, being overwhelmed, that, oh my God, the end moment, that they just get stuck. But here's the great thing about the end moments. So often they become new beginnings. And if you can already have all that in your mindset of, I know something hard's coming, when it comes, I'm going to start to move. So we recognize. The second thing we do, we evaluate our assets. We start looking at, well, what do I have at my disposal to bring to this problem? If it is a life-threatening illness or injury, what doctors do I need? What family support do I need? Am I going to have to stop working for a little while? What does my insurance do? I mean, all these different things, all these different questions we have to look at so that we know what we have to work with. And then from there, we move to the next step, which is assess. And we assess our options and our outcomes. So often when people are in a life ambush and they finally come to recognize that they're in that crisis, they want to move out of it immediately. I want to get out of this. I want to relieve the pain. But sometimes we make hasty decisions that actually don't do a good job of getting us out of that situation. We only put ourselves in a worse situation.
We try to numb it. We try to get out of it in that sense sometimes versus actually
taking the action.
Yeah.
So when we're assessing our options and outcomes, it takes a little bit of time. In a firefight, obviously you have seconds. The good news in most life ambushes, you have minutes, hours, days. I mean, sometimes depending on what it is, it can even be months. But we look at, hey, option A, this is what the potential outcome could be. Option B, this is the potential outcome. When we go through that, now we start to look at, okay, it looks like option B would be the best outcome. And sometimes it's the best of the worst decisions. None are a great decision, but anything is better than staying on that X, staying in the point of the incident, because the longer you stay on it, it's like quicksand. It will pull you down and hold you to it.
How do you recognize when you're in that and deal with it, but without holding on to the past? I think oftentimes when we're dealing with trauma, we suppress it and we push it to the side because we don't want to deal with the emotions and we don't want to keep reliving that hurt. So how do we deal with the trauma and overcome it, but without constantly reliving the past? If I could have done this differently in dealing with those past emotions, which we know we can't change the past, yet we still will relive it over and over again in our minds.
Yeah, so many people do it. I did it in the hospital at the beginning, but I finally reached this point where I was like, I can't change it.
Yeah.
There's no amount of rumination, is what they call that, to sit there and circle on that negative energy, on those negative things that happen. The other thing that tends to happen when a bad incident or a traumatic event, a life ambush occurs, we look for someone to blame. And sometimes there actually is someone to blame. I mean, you look at a family that lost a loved one to murder. Yeah. They focus all their time and energy on convicting that individual who killed their loved one. And by the time they're finally convicted, it doesn't fix it. It doesn't bring their loved one back. And they're still in pain because all their time and energy has been focused on that. So the reality is, what I tell people is, you've got to let that go. You've got to let the past go. And you've got to start looking to the future. How do you shape your future? How do you make your future better? How do you take what happened? And there is always something positive that comes out of the negative. But remember, it's a choice. You can choose to just only focus on the negativity, which so many people do, but they can't change any of it. We can't go back and change any of it. It doesn't matter if somebody did something horrifically terrible to you. Maybe they're in jail, maybe they're dead. Who knows what happened to them? You can't go change it. All you can do is start looking forward. Another term for life ambushes, I call them life storms. And so often when you're in that life storm, you're consumed by the darkness and the torrential downpour and the lightning and the winds and all of that. But somewhere out there beyond that storm is sunshine.
Yeah.
But so many people focus on just staying in the storm. They sit on that X. So this is why I tell people, you can't change it. You can't change it. Look to move forward. And eventually you will get out of it. It will never fully go away. That pain will always still be there. We're always going to carry those scars. But what I tell people is, man, you now have an amazing gift. You have a story with a purpose.
Yeah.
So now why not try and help others that have been through what you've been through? Even if it's something just, you and I speaking together and, hey, Rachel, you know what? I went through that once also. So this is how I got off the X and drove forward. I know you can do it too. And I'm here to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you open up and you share your story, it's amazing by the amount of people that do come forward and they say, me too, maybe not being in a scenario exactly identical to yours, but dealing with that past trauma. So the motivation behind writing this book, tell me a little bit about that. What prompted you to want to create this book and help people who are going through life ambushes?
I wanted a step-by-step playbook for people that have been through a traumatic event in their lives. Because so many people would ask me, both in my personal life from my injury, both on my leadership journey, how did you overcome this, this grievous leadership mistake that potentially could have ended your career, and you built yourself back up. And then even, despite a major business setback, how did I drive forward from that? So I had these 3 different components: physical, personal, and professional, which everyone deals with. Everybody in life has had life ambushes in these areas, or they're dealing with them. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I want to give them a playbook that they can follow, a step-by-step process that either they can utilize because they're going to go through a life ambush, they can use it in their business, they can use it in their family, or they can hand it to a family member or a friend, because so often, all of us watch someone else that's going through a life ambush, and we can see it clear as day, but they're still in denial.
Yeah.
So I wanted something that someone could hand and say, hey, I really think you should read this. And the book is broken into 4 parts. And the very first part is basically, how do I get out of a life ambush right now? How do I, accept that I'm in a life ambush? Am I following these steps? Or these are the things that I'm experiencing? Am I overwhelmed to the point of shutting down? Am I pushing people away? Am I filled with anxiety and dread every single day? All these things are indicators that, hey, maybe I'm in a life ambush. Mm-hmm. So your ability to give that to somebody, and now to give them a step-by-step process on how to look, hey, this is it. I'm on the X. And I've had so many people in my talks come up to me and say, oh my God, I'm on the X. My so-and-so passed away last year and I haven't moved forward. Or I had a young lady, I spoke at a college a couple weeks ago, and she came up to me after my talk and broke down in tears. And she was going to nursing school. She was a single mom, and she said, I was thinking about leaving nursing school. She said, I'm really struggling. She was going to graduate in May. So she only had 6 months left. But she had been verbally abused by her dad, and then unfortunately married another guy who wasn't much better, who verbally and emotionally abused her. So she bought into this mindset of, you're not good enough. You're never going to be good enough. You're never going to be able to make it. And she said, I was stuck on the X. And she was like, I was starting to believe those lies that I'd been told. But she said, your talk made me believe once again that I have the power. And that is the thing. You have the power. You have the choice to get off the X. Anyone can do it. Don't believe the lies that are in your head. Here's the biggest thing about a life ambush. The battlefield of the mind is the most dangerous one you'll ever walk on.
The story you tell yourself.
Yep.
Yeah. Incredible. And I'm definitely going to read this book. I'm super excited because, admitting I've gone through a life ambush earlier this year. I went through a pretty traumatic breakup, and it's something that I've even had to deal with quite a bit. So this is something that's helped me even and has resonated me with quite a bit. So I'm very grateful to have you on here today. So when does the book come out?
So Overcome releases on December 10th. It's available for pre-sale now. So I'm really excited. We actually have put together, my marketing team has put together some great, pre-sale tools. I have an online course called the 72 Hours to Peak Performance. So if you go to overcomebook.com and you were to buy a copy through there, you can upload your receipt and get a free access to the 72-hour course. And then we have some other things, but it'll be available at all major booksellers. It's available in audio format, in electronic format.
Awesome. And how can people find you and connect with you more, Jason?
So you can go to jasonredman.com is my website for speaking. And I am speaking all across the country, teaching organizations, individuals, and teams how to get off the X and how to thrive from the ambushes they find themselves in. I'm on all the social media platforms, but Instagram is definitely the one I'm most active on. So Jason Redman WW is my Instagram handle. And if you reach out to me, I'm the one that's answering. I don't have anybody else. And I try to answer everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. And you guys, if you enjoyed today's podcast, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, share it with a friend, leave a review. I love hearing with you guys. And this has been Sheer Madness. Thank you so much, Jason. So let's close out by watching this quick video.
Somewhere out there, on the horizon, a storm is brewing. A raging hurricane. A devastating tornado, an overwhelming tsunami. These are not your typical storms. These are the storms of life, and no one can avoid them. When they hit us, they are devastating and overwhelming. They terrorize us with pain, fear, anxiety, and in the aftermath, leave us filled with grief, regret, and loss. The reality of life is, we are either in a life storm, coming out of a life storm, or somewhere out there on the horizon, one is waiting for us. But I have good news. You can absolutely be prepared for and overcome any life storm that comes your way. My name is Jason Redman. I am a retired Navy SEAL that encountered a major catastrophic storm in the form of an enemy ambush in Iraq in 2007. It ended my military career, crippled my body, and disfigured my face. But despite the pain and despair I felt, I knew one critical fact I had learned in my special operations career. You can overcome and endure any storm, or as I call them, life ambushes. This is what my new book, Overcome, is all about. How to meet adversity head on and how to be ready for the future challenges that are coming. Your next storm is on the horizon. Will you be ready? I wrote Overcome as an extension of years of experience from when I got out of the military. After I'd written my first book, The Trident, I started working with so many wounded warriors and meeting individuals that have been through traumatic events. And they would frequently ask me, how did you do what you did? How did you endure this incredibly catastrophic event and overcome it and stay positive and drive forward? I never had really broken it down into a step-by-step relatable process. Overcome really became that journey of coming to understand, well, how did I do that? If you are in a life ambush, if there is someone out there that is struggling and says, my world has come crumbling down around me, this book is designed to help them understand that storms don't go on forever. Life ambushes don't go on forever unless you sit in the middle of it. I was able to better overcome the life ambush I had been through, that enemy ambush, and launch from it because I was probably more prepared than at any time in my life for that ambush. I was balanced in something I call the Pentagon of Peak Performance that I teach in the book. And that's how this book is laid out. A step-by-step process to build all these things in your lives out there so that you are better prepared, that you are ready for when they come because they're coming. People get it. It is very relatable. When I talk to people about being on the X and being in a stuck point in their life because of some sort of major life ambush, it resonates. What makes it unique is it gives you a playbook based on real-world experiences, based on special operations principles that we know work, but we've taken them and we've made them relatable to everyday life. I've managed to overcome 3 major life ambushes in my life, and these are the principles that enabled it to happen. I've worked with thousands of wounded warriors and individuals that have been through major trauma in their life. these things work. If they apply these principles, they are able to move forward and they are better prepared for the future life ambushes that are coming. All these incredible stories are told not only from a military viewpoint, but the more relatable, everyday human being viewpoint that everyone out there is going to be able to understand and relate to. Leadership is leadership, teamwork is teamwork, the overcome mindset and resiliency, those principles apply whether they're in the military, whether you're in the police, whether you're in the fire service, whether you're in business. Those principal qualities of being human, they are the same. And this book highlights those principles and how you can apply them into your life. That is what makes it unique, and that's what makes it relatable.